Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you.
Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 90. I have HG Tudor, who runs the Knowing the Narcissist YouTube channel. He prefers to go without video, so we're both going without video here. Yeah, it's an interesting channel about narcissistic personality disorders and other psychology things. He does a lot of interesting analysis of celebrities, especially Meghan Markle, but other people like recently Sinead O'Connor, Amber Heard, Johnny Depp. It's a very interesting channel. How are you, HG?
I'm very well, Chris. Thank you for inviting me on.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So I always like to start out. What got you interested in this topic?
Well, I'm talking about myself, of course, because I'm a narcissistic psychopath.
Oh, okay. When did you realize you were a narcissist and psychopath?
Well, as I've explained on numerous occasions, I've always known that I was set apart and different from other people. And then around the time after I left university, a former girlfriend of mine who was a psychology graduate pointed out that she believed that I was both a narcissist and a psychopath. What she explained made sense to me, although, of course, I didn't admit that to her. It would be foolish to do that. So I listened to what she had to say, went away and did some more reading, and a lot of it seemed to make sense. And so thus I had a label for what I was, which was always useful. And as time went on, I was later diagnosed as having antisocial personality disorder and also narcissistic personality disorder. And thus I came to know that I'm a narcissistic psychopath. And as part of that, I've been sharing my knowledge about myself and my kind with millions of people.
Yeah. Yeah, I asked largely because that we probably have a lot of people who aren't familiar with your channel, and this would just be a way to introduce them to it. So that was very interesting. So, what do you think? How does if somebody is a narcissist, how do they find that out? And what are the characteristics of narcissists that you found?
Well, most narcissists are unaware, and therefore they don't tend to find out in a way that causes them to accept what they are. Most narcissists find out that they're narcissists because somebody else will tell them that they are, but they won't accept that. Their narcissism will compel them to reject it. So a lot of the time, unaware narcissists stay unaware because that's intrinsic within their narcissism, that they are, in essence, not allowed to know what they are. They're shielded from it. It's part of the way that the self-defense mechanism that is the narcissism functions. There might be instances where if a narcissist, for whatever reason, has been attending a competent therapist or psychologist, that they may well diagnose them as being a narcissist. And again, an unaware narcissist is not going to recognize that, but they may well receive a formal diagnosis alongside somebody just reaching the conclusion that they are one because they've been in a difficult relationship with them, which has all the hallmarks of the way that a narcissist behaves.
Yes, that's true. What characterizes a lot of narcissist relationships with narcissists?
It depends upon the dynamic in terms of, is it in a romantic setting, a familial one, a social one, a work one, a neighborly one? There are lots of different ways that it manifests. But in terms of what are you looking at that you might be dealing with a narcissist? Well, it's a word that does get thrown around rather a lot. And to some extent, that's done with a degree of justification because there are far more narcissists around than people actually do realize. And more people have become aware of narcissism than it used to be the case. That stated, there does seem to be a body of individuals that when somebody does something against them they don't like, they say, oh, you're such a narcissist. Well, just because somebody's done something you don't like, that does not make them a narcissist. And what you're looking at is an individual who has no emotional empathy, but may be able to fake that emotional empathy, so they make it look like they care. But a typical dynamic that would take place between a narcissist and a victim in a romantic setting is that the narcissist draws that person in and does so very quickly through a process known as love bombing. So the narcissist will show a lot of enthusiasm for spending time with you, will flatter you, possibly excessively, and in some instances, flatter you where it doesn't really add up. You think you're reasonably good looking, but they go over the top in describing how handsome or how beautiful you are. They often want to have a lot of sex with you, but that's not always the case. They will monopolize time with you. They will draw you in and make you feel very good about yourself, will mirror you in terms of having similar interests and similar dislikes to your dislikes. They will want to make you the center of the universe and you feel like a king or a queen. You'll often find that they will often speak badly about previous relationships. Oh, my ex-wife, she was a lunatic, she abused me, and such like. That they often don't necessarily talk much about their families, or if they do, they just talk about how wonderful their family is, which seems somewhat unrealistic. And there's lots of different tells that can take place during this stage, and I write about them in one of my books called Red Flag, which gives you 50 signs of narcissist seduction. And the point is, there's not any one thing that means, oh, you're dealing with a narcissist. It's an indicator. And what you have to look out for is, are there lots of indicators? If so, it's highly likely you're dealing with a narcissist. If there's just one, it probably means that you're not. So there are those things to look out for. And then when the narcissist has drawn you in a romantic setting, they embed you in the relationship and you get what's called the golden period. So there's a golden period of seduction. There's a golden period of being embedded. That's roughly 6 to 18 months, can be a little bit shorter, can be a little bit longer. And everything's great. And you think, oh, I've met my soulmate. I met the light of my life, my flower in bloom. Everything's wonderful. And then you will start to be devalued. Now, with the devaluation stage, sometimes some people get the stranger zone, which means the narcissist isn't out and out horrible to you. They just seem to withdraw from you a lot. Gone is all of the rampant sex. That doesn't happen as much. They don't seem as enthused. And if you ask them, then it's wrong. They go, no, it's okay. So they're not turning around and hitting you or stealing from you or calling you bad names. But they act as if like they're a stranger to you. That doesn't always happen. But that's part of the devaluation stage that can happen for some people. And then during this sustained devaluation is when the more serious abuse occurs, which can range from being cheated on, whether you know about it or whether you find out about it later, physical violence, sexual violence, stealing your money, turning your children against you, separating you from friends, smearing you to other people, going on in circular conversations, making false accusations against you, accusations that come out of nowhere, smashing up property in front of you, stealing from you, and there's lots and lots of different types of manipulations that are used, which are of a malign nature. And then you'll get a respite period. So the golden period comes back and you think, oh, everything's all right again. Thank goodness. The ship has been steadied. The sea has become calm. And then off it goes again into devaluation. And you get that roller coaster ride. And then this relationship will go on like that until either the victim escapes, they've had enough, which is unusual, or the narcissist gets rid of you, which is more likely, or sometimes neither of those two things happen. And what goes on is a roller coaster ride of you being devalued, then given a respite period, then being devalued, and a respite period, up and down it goes. And you struggle to make sense of what's going on. And invariably, the victim thinks that they are the one that's caused it because they can't fathom out what they're dealing with. Now, that's just one dynamic of one area, namely a romantic relationship. There are other dynamics within the romantic relationship, and there are other dynamics in non-romantic relationships. But that's just one example of one of the most common that takes place is the one that I've described, and invariably and arguably the one that causes the most damage to people.
Yeah. So do you think maybe after, the 6 to 18 months, the narcissist just gets bored?
Essentially, yes. What happens is a narcissist needs 4 things from a person, not necessarily all 4 from the same person. And so what can happen is these 4 things are called the prime aims. So they are fuel, character traits, control, and residual benefits. So the narcissist must control people. So we will do that sometimes in a benign way, flattering you, buying you a gift, holding your hair back when you're vomiting after having drunk too much, giving you a lift somewhere. Often we will control you in a malign way, and I described some of those ways earlier on. We also need what's called fuel. This is where you provide us with some form of emotional response. So if you say to a narcissist, I love you, you've given the narcissist fuel. If you say to the narcissist, I hate you, you've given them fuel. Make a birthday cake for the narcissist, that's fuel. Buy them a gift, that's fuel. Have sex with them, that's fuel. Make them a cup of tea, that's fuel. And the narcissist needs that. So what happens is that the narcissist identifies somebody who's going to be easy to control, who will provide lots of fuel, character traits, and residual benefits, and makes that person the intimate partner primary source. There are other people in what's known as the fuel matrix, secondary and tertiary sources, but they're not as important. Some people, the narcissist just controls, and they don't get any fuel or character traits or residual benefits from them. But usually, at the very minimum, a person is controlled and fuel is obtained from them. Now, with regard to this fuel, the narcissist has selected somebody that they spend a lot of time with. They probably live with them. They may well get married to them. And all of that delicious, invigorating fuel is fantastic for the narcissist who's greedy for it. It's fresh, and it's sparkling, and it's invigorating. But then, as you've identified, over time, the narcissist essentially becomes bored and the fuel becomes stale. And what happens as one of the devaluing triggers is either your fuel, you've been giving it plentifully, so it becomes stale and boring to the narcissist, or for some other reason, you might inadvertently be rationing it. So you're not providing lashings of it, and you're not providing it frequently enough, with the consequence that the narcissist's response to that is, again, to then instigate the devaluation, because you're viewed as letting the narcissist down. So when it comes to fuel, which is one of the prime aims, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Provide lots of it, it turns stale, you'll be devalued. Somehow ration it, then you're not providing enough of it frequently enough, therefore you're viewed as letting the narcissist down, you'll be devalued. So when it comes to the dynamic between a narcissist and an intimate partner, primary source victim, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, partner, cohab, you'll always be devalued, because whatever you do, you're going to trigger a devaluation. There is no escaping it.
That's very interesting. How does this play out, say, in maybe work relationships or professional relationships?
Well, in a work relationship, the interaction there is invariably, if it's not intimate, then the colleague is a non-intimate secondary source. And what you then have is a shelving dynamic. So the narcissist will intermittently interact with that person. They need to control them. They will draw fuel from them. They may gain a character trait or 2 from them, and they may well get a residual benefit from this person. So let's take, for example, a working relationship between a narcissist and their boss. They will need to control their boss. There, of course, is already an inequality of power because the other person is the boss. So some narcissists may deal with that control by not doing what is asked of them. Others become arse lickers and kiss the backside of the boss, using flattery as a means to control. The boss's response provides fuel, and the residual benefit, of course, is that that boss may well give them a promotion, maybe the one that's actually paying the narcissist money as a residual benefit. Now, the narcissist and that non-intimate secondary source are not with one another anywhere near as much as it is between the narcissist and an intimate partner primary source. So what happens is you have what's called a shelf dynamic. So the narcissist doesn't interact with that colleague, and then does. And they might interact, work on a project for a couple of hours. They're in a meeting room with one another. During that 2-hour meeting, the narcissist must control that other person and draw fuel from them. Then at the end of the meeting, they part, and in essence, that colleague goes on the shelf, and the narcissist doesn't bother with them, maybe for a couple of days. This type of relationship is less tempestuous because since there is a lower level of involvement between the narcissist and the person, that person is less likely to cause a problem for the narcissist. First of all, their fuel will stay fresh because they're only providing it every so often. Secondly, the narcissist does not expect to get lots of fuel from this person because of their status as a non-intimate secondary source. Therefore, they don't suffer the same fate as the intimate partner primary source. The fuel does not become stale, and the alternative, namely, you're not giving me enough, isn't a problem because there isn't the expectation of receiving lots of fuel to begin with. So the non-intimate secondary source is less likely to be devalued. Furthermore, because they don't deal as much with the narcissist, they're less likely to do something to threaten the control of the narcissist, which requires a devaluing response. And furthermore, that person might form part of the facade of the narcissist. Namely, by being nice to colleagues and friends, the narcissist shows the outside world that they are a kind and decent person. And it's the intimate partner primary source who gets the trouble behind closed doors. But everybody else thinks he's a really nice guy because that's what he portrays to the outside world. So it's a different dynamic. And if that non-intimate secondary source causes a problem for the narcissist, they may be dealt with a favorable response to maintain the facade, or they get what's known as a corrective devaluation, not the sustained devaluation, but a corrective one, which is like a rap over the knuckles. So they might get a bit of a cold shoulder until they say, what's the matter? And they say, well, you did this. And they go, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to. Their apology shows that they're under control and they've given more fuel. So the threat to control that was posed has now been nullified by the narcissist and everything carries on all right. So you get a different dynamic between the narcissist and a non-intimate secondary source. And that's applicable to colleagues, to friends, to family, with variations, of course.
Yes, and of course, the work narcissist may only be, there for 40 hours a week, and there's a definite boundary of when they interact and when they don't. What do you think? Let's imagine you happen to be working for somebody who is a narcissist, or what should you do in that situation, and how do you maybe do what you can to avoid working for a narcissist?
Well, let's not lose sight of the fact that it's not always a hellish existence working for a narcissist, because a narcissist, in order to maintain a facade, may treat somebody very well. Indeed, a narcissist might have a favorite, and therefore they actually, particularly if the narcissist is in a position of power and influence, it may well be the case that they visit their power and influence in a favorable fashion upon somebody. So in those circumstances, it actually doesn't become a problem for that individual. Where it does become a problem, of course, there are lots of different ways where it can manifest. There are some narcissists, of course, that will not recognize the boundary of work and start to try and start an intimate relationship. Often individuals who get into problems with sexual harassment cases turn out to be narcissists because they don't recognize the boundary and they try to make a pass at somebody. They try and have sex with a colleague. They make unwanted advances. They make comments about that person of a sexual nature. They stare at them, etc. In other instances, it may be that they bully an individual by overloading them with work, giving them less preferential projects, etc., turning other people against them in the workplace, preventing people from being involved in projects, so sending them to Coventry, so excluding them. It might be the case that it gives them very difficult tasks they have to undertake. It could be simple things such as putting them in a place where it's the worst desk in the office, next to the toilets, underneath the air conditioning, things like that. There are lots of different ways that a narcissist can bully and intimidate and generally devalue somebody in the workplace. And in those circumstances, the most effective thing to do is leave. Now, I know many people say, well, I need the money. Indeed. But there are other jobs available. And that's the most effective way, that if you realize you're dealing with a narcissist in the workplace, is resign and get out. It's far easier. If you can't or won't do that, then there are other steps that you can take to deal with the situation. And they're all set out in an assistance package that I've created that's called How to Handle a Narcissist in the Workplace. And that sets out a range of practical applications and steps of things that you can do and things that you ought to know. And I have that in my knowledge vault, which can be found at my website, narcsite, narcsite.com. So if there's anybody listening who wants to obtain that package, they can get it from the knowledge vault, which is in the menu bar at narcsite.com. And that will help them considerably dealing with the narcissist at work.
Yeah, that's definitely, if you can try to get out of it. Although, are there professions or fields or careers that you would say tend to attract narcissists? I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, of course, would be politicians. But where do you think we're more likely to find narcissists?
Well, politics is one of the honeypots for our kind, because in politics, it allows people to get their hands on power, and power can be used to control. So whether it's governmental power, financial power, military power, just by virtue of having the status of being a politician affords us a sense of power also. So it attracts lots of narcissists because it caters to that first prime aim of control. You also have a lot of people responding to you, doing what you require, answering you, giving you things, etc. All of that's fuel. So it means lots of people coming to the fuel matrix. You get to deal with lots of different people, which gives exposure to different character traits, and there are residual benefits. You can manage a facade of being a supposedly caring individual. You gain access to networks, and of course, that old staple, money. So politics really does attract lots of narcissists. But there are other fields: law, medicine, entertainment, sport. Those are just 4 areas. Again, they cater to the prime aims particularly effectively. So if you take entertainment, being a pop or rock star, you can control loads of people because you're popular. You stand on a stage in front of 40,000 people who are all screaming your name. That allows you, your fame allows you to control those people. All of those people turning up to your concerts, sending you emails or letters, as it used to be the case, buying your records, downstreaming your music, turning up at your concerts and screaming and so forth. Even the weirdos that are following you around, all of that's fuel. Again, you get to meet lots of different people, touring the world, etc., provides access to lots of character traits, and you can maintain a facade through being that pop or rock star, and you make a lot of money, which again is a residual benefit. So entertainment in its various forms, whether you're a film star, a pop star, a writer, a screenwriter, a television presenter, whatever it might be, the fields of entertainment again attract a lot of narcissists. And also bear in mind that the ability to put yourself in front of people, whether it's on a stage, whether it's on a podium, whether it's in the Senate, wherever it might be, that often requires some strong narcissistic traits to begin with in terms of vanity, pride, and showmanship. So you're more likely to find that even if you don't deal with a narcissist, you'll encounter many people with strong narcissistic traits, because in a way you need to have those in order to get through the first marker, if you will, in those particular fields. If you're a shrinking violet, you're not going to get very far.
Did you say shrinking violet?
I did.
Yeah. I'm not really sure what that means.
It means somebody that's shy and hides their light under a bushel.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. So you think often narcissists just do things to get attention, like they might dye their hair green or wear something flashy, or is that always characteristic of a narcissist in your opinion?
Well, somebody who dyes their hair green, it doesn't mean they're a narcissist, but it's something a narcissist might do. So because the narcissist needs to control and draw fuel, they're driven by those aspects of the prime aims. So if they go to somebody's birthday party and it's not their birthday, that causes a problem for the narcissist because everybody is celebrating somebody else. And the narcissist, that means that it threatens the narcissist's sense of control, which, remember, for most narcissists, they're not actually aware of. It's going on subconsciously. And they also subconsciously have that need for fuel. They don't think to themselves, oh, I need a load of attention here because I need fuel. They have a sensation where they're thinking, oh, look at her, the birthday girl. She thinks she's really good, doesn't she? So the narcissism creates envy in the narcissist so that it makes them think, look at her crowing and, getting all the attention off the men. Do you really think she's something? So the narcissist might go over and actually confront them and go, you think you're all that, but you're not, in order to create a scene. Or they might not be as aggressive as that, and they might mutter to somebody else going, gosh, have you seen what she's wearing? Be bitchy about that person, in effect, smearing the birthday girl to somebody else in the expectation that somebody else will react, and their reaction gives the narcissist a sense of control over the birthday girl whilst giving them fuel. You might get somebody that turns up and puts their fist through the birthday cake, causing a scene. Then all eyes are on the narcissist. Thus, they're gaining that control and gaining that fuel.
Do you think the narcissist is a person who always talks about him or herself, or?
Sometimes, but remember, certain narcissists will feign an interest in another person to make them feel special. So there are lots of different types, and I have a categorization system which breaks down into 4 main categories: lesser, mid-range, greater, and ultra. And then with lesser, mid-range, and greater, there are subcategories. So there are similarities and differences between all of these different subcategories and flavors of narcissist. So with some of those narcissists, they will be quite brazen and they will just talk about themselves. Then there'll be other narcissists that won't do that. And what they'll do is they will appear to take an interest in the person that they're talking to and ask them lots of questions about themselves and appear to be listening rather well and responding to what's being said. So narcissists do present in different ways.
Yeah. So, talking about areas that attract, this is all very interesting. What do you think? What do you think about love bombing? I mean, does love bombing necessarily mean that somebody is a narcissist?
Love bombing is a manifestation of a narcissist. So if you find yourself being subjected to that, then you are being involved with a narcissist. But you've got to, of course, discern that it is love bombing. Just because somebody writes a poem and sends it to you, that doesn't mean you're dealing with a narcissist. But as I explained earlier on in the conversation, there are lots of indicators during the seduction which point to the love bombing, and they're covered in my book, Red Flag. So, for example, if someone is excessively complimenting you and you recognize that the compliments are actually over the top, so there's lots of them and they're a bit too much. So you think to yourself, well, I've got a decent enough figure, but I'm not exactly a hard body, and this person keeps describing me as a hard body. Something's not quite right there. If somebody's buying you a lot of gifts very early on in the relationship, that's a red flag. Somebody tells you that they love you after 2 dates, that's a red flag. Somebody wants to move in with you after 3 dates, that's a red flag. Somebody that's very disparaging about their exes and goes into tremendous detail about that, that's another red flag. So you, in those early stages with the love bombing, it's a desire to get you under control as quickly as possible, drink deep of that delicious, invigorating fuel. So it's done by monopolizing your time, excluding you from other people, perhaps getting you to cancel arrangements. So if you played badminton every week, all of a sudden you find yourself not doing so because the narcissist wants to spend time with you. On the face of it, that seems like a lovely thing to do. But already your pre-existing life is being interfered with as a consequence of the narcissist's need to control you. If you're being complimented, given lots of great sex, the narcissist keeps turning up uninvited. And you think, oh, it's nice that they've turned up, but I didn't invite them, and I actually wanted a bit of time to myself. You find that the individual talks to you on the phone for hours, bombards you through the day when you're at work with lots of text messages. All of these are signs of love bombing.
One other thing too I've been thinking a lot about is, do you think there's a greater tendency for narcissists to be only children versus those who might have had 3 or 4 siblings?
Not necessarily, because a narcissist is created by the genetic predisposition towards becoming a narcissist, allied with a lack of control environment. Now, you can make a case for a lack of control environment in both scenarios that you presented. So, for instance, a child who's one of 4 might not get much attention because parents' attention is stretched between 4 children. So they find themselves emotionally neglected, which creates a lack of control environment. A child that's the only child may have praise heaped upon them. They're smothered. They are not given an opportunity to make decisions for themselves. Everything is done for them. So you can have a lack of control environment appear in either of those scenarios that I've just described. Of course, physical, sexual, emotional abuse could be meted out to a single child compared to being meted out as against a child who's got several siblings. So I wouldn't say that there's necessarily any particular greater likelihood of an only child, because in some instances, an only child, there isn't a genetic predisposition because there are no narcissists in the family. Mum and dad aren't narcissists. Grandparents aren't narcissists. And therefore, just because they're an only child, that they might be doted on, but they don't have the genetic predisposition. Therefore, they can't become a narcissist. Or even if there is the genetic predisposition, they're brought up in a way that's not a lack of control environment, because being an only child does not per se equate to being a lack of control environment. So whilst there might be some who say, oh yeah, only children are more likely to be narcissists, I can see that there's an argument for that, but it doesn't necessarily follow that that's the case. Indeed, there are lots of children who are only children who aren't narcissists, and in fact get a bit of a bad press. Recently, I analysed the baby killer, Lucy Letby, the nurse who's now serving a number of life sentences in the United Kingdom. And at one juncture, reference was made to her being an only child. And somebody said, typical only child behaviour, which is a bit of a sweeping statement to make, because there are plenty of children who are only children who are not narcissists. There are plenty of children that come from a multi-sibling environment that are narcissists. I'm one of them, for example. I have siblings. So I don't think anyone can draw any firm conclusions from whether you have siblings or not. As I've explained, that a lack of control environment can come in sole or multi-sibling situations.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I don't necessarily want to go into, real life, but can you think of a fictional character that you might, call a narcissist? I mean, one thing that comes to my mind is Christian Grey from 50 Shades of Grey.
Yes, I would agree with that, although I'm loath to talk about that piece of literal abomination.
I like the way you said that. It's. I wonder also, is there a tendency of also maybe narcissists like to use big words?
We like to keep it simple.
Okay.
Well, some do, because some will be flowery in their language because of the grandiosity that they exhibit.
Yeah.
So, again, just because somebody uses a lot of flowery words and long words, etc., doesn't mean they're a narcissist. It may well be that they're particularly well read and they're especially articulate, and they have access to a Roget's thesaurus. But there will be one narcissist that will use flowery language because it's part of their grandiosity. And often what you'll find is that with a narcissist, they may well use that because they want to demonstrate their supposed cerebral superiority. And it's a good way of belittling people because they know that the person listening to them doesn't understand what they're saying. And they want to belittle them by making them ask for clarification. So they can show, well, you're a bit thick, aren't you? You didn't understand. So I will now use words of one syllable.
Yes, and of course, just doing what they can to appear smart. Do you? Yeah, it's very. So you talked about in some cases narcissist versus empath. Why do you think sometimes narcissism gets confused with being an empath?
Because there are certain narcissists who are unaware who believe that they're empathic. And so they hold themselves out as kind and caring, not realizing that their form of kindness and care is simply being utilized for the purposes of control and drawing fuel. A narcissist can ostensibly be kind. Take, for example, I help millions of people through the information that I provide. But you all know, because I've explained this to you, that I'm not doing it because I'm kind and caring. I'm doing it because it benefits me. But I tell you that because I'm aware of what I am. There are plenty of narcissists that don't know what they are, and they think they're kind, but actually their behaviors show that they're not. Sometimes they are, but a lot of the time they're not. And the motivation behind that, they think it's because they are genuinely kind, but their true motivation, because they're a narcissist, is the pursuit of the prime aims. So the confusion often arises because certain narcissists behave like false empaths. Indeed, you get certain narcissists that go around shouting out about how they're an empath, or I'm a super duper kick-ass ninja Heyoka empath that takes down narcissists. No, you're not. You're an unaware narcissist. But they think that they're an empath. And because their narcissism makes them believe that they are, so they portray that to the outside world.
Yeah, I wonder too. Do you think narcissists tend to get involved with a lot of philanthropy or doing charity work? I mean, it's as
Yes,
if
they do.
Yeah,
That what you tend to find with narcissists and philanthropy, there's a lot of talking about it, but not a lot of delivery. In some instances, it's easy enough just to hand over some money. And there's a lot of putting their name to things because that looks good. And they often hijack the good works of other people. So I'm loath to talk about it too much because I talk about a reason amount already. But Harry's wife, Meghan Markle, is a good example of that. She doesn't actually deliver. She hijacks other people's projects, talks a lot about the things that she's going to do or apparently has done, but you don't see a lot of boots on the ground activity. Now, more empathic individuals are the ones that roll their sleeves up and get out there in the field and deliver. They work the soup kitchens. They're out there with Médecins Sans Frontières, actually helping people. They're not just sat in their ivory tower saying, we should all be kind to one another and we should make the world a better place by having equity and equality, etc., yada, 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 beige word salad incoming. So many narcissists are engaged in philanthropy because it makes them look good. And, of course, it all goes back to the prime aims. By appearing to be this kind, charitable individual, people are better predisposed towards you, thus they are easier to control. They praise you for what you've done, thus giving you fuel, and it provides you with the residual benefit of managing a facade of being a kind and decent person, so that when you go home at the weekend and beat your wife and then you are engaging in various nefarious sexual activities with your mistress, nobody will believe it if that rumor gets out, because they'll go, no, surely not him. He gives 10% of his income to the orphanage for unwanted ginger children, and he's regularly doing fundraisers on his tours for saving the gay blind whale, etc. No, I don't believe the fact that he beats his wife and that he engages in rather unusual sexual behaviors with his mistress. So that's where the philanthropy and charitable activity of a narcissist serves a purpose for them.
certainly. Do you think narcissists also tend to always be finger wagging and giving advice like you should do this, you should do that, often unsolicited advice?
Again, just because somebody does that doesn't mean that they are a narcissist. It can be indicative because there is that presumptive prescriptive behavior that's going on. Some narcissists don't care. So they think, oh, I'm not going to tell anybody how to live their life. I can't be bothered. I'm not interested enough. But certain types of narcissists, usually mid-range, as per my characterization, are likely to say, you ought to be doing this. You should be doing this. You should live your life this way. So they take upon them this sort of moral guardianship of people, whereby they, of course, are complete hypocrites, but they tell everybody else how they should live their lives. And that can transfer to people, obviously, within the church, whether it's organized religion or less formal religion. that exists, explaining to people what they should be doing. Lifestyle coaches saying, you shouldn't eat these things, you should only eat these things, you should behave in this particular way, this is how you should conduct yourself. So many narcissists do go down that route, which will include some finger wagging.
Certainly. One person in real life I just thought of to ask you about. What would you say about Richard Branson?
Oh, Branson is a consummate self-publicist, and whether it's crashing in a hot air balloon over Ireland or taking one of his gleaming rocket penises up into space, the fact is that with Branson, he's a narcissist. He likes the publicity. He likes to be seen. He likes the responses of everybody. It's necessary for him to get people to react to him. He's a bit of a showman with all of that type of thing. So he fits the mold of a narcissist, yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Another one, say Mick Jagger.
Yeah, well, again, you're going to have to be a showman anyway to get up on a stage and strut your stuff. So you're going to have some narcissistic traits there to begin with. The fact that he keeps on doing it, given the age of the years, also supports it. Again, it's not determinative of itself, but it's an indicator. You also have to look at the question of the fact, I think, not so long ago, he had a child with a woman far, far, far younger than him. He's not going to be around on this planet too much longer. And so therefore, you've got to question the empathic status of someone that decides they're going to bring a life into this world, knowing that they're not necessarily going to be around. And of course, what's at play there is the pursuit of immortality.
Yes, and of course, I don't know how many kids he has already. I think he's, I'm sure Mick has a long list of women in his life, though. I'm sure,
Indeed. So you also have there the indicators in terms of lots of intimate partners. I don't know the full history as to whether he's been faithful or not. I suspect that he has not. Infidelity is another indicator. It doesn't mean somebody, again, is a narcissist, and I must emphasize that. It's merely an indicator, and you have to look at lots of indicators to make that determination.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's certainly something I find interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And, what do you think, it seems like maybe to a certain degree, we all kind of start out as narcissists, but then later we grow out of that.
There is an argument. It is correct that a baby is, in a way, a little narcissist, or perhaps a better description is to describe them as narcissistic, because narcissism hasn't formed yet. So it will be incorrect to say they are a narcissist, but they certainly behave like that because the baby expects every need to be attended to, because the human infant is pathetic. It can't regulate its temperature. It can't soothe itself. It can't feed itself. It can't hydrate itself. It can't entertain itself. It relies on everything from somebody else, usually a primary caregiver. And it therefore believes that that primary caregiver is simply there to do everything they require, which is very much the mindset of a narcissist. Because a narcissist expects everybody else to always anticipate and understand the needs of the narcissist, even if they've not said what they are, that somehow through telepathy, you are expected to understand what the narcissist is requiring and what the narcissist wants. So a baby is very similar, but then what happens, assuming there isn't the genetic predisposition towards narcissism and there isn't a lack of control environment, that child learns coping mechanisms. It realizes that that person actually has needs and requirements of their own and isn't set on this earth just to look after them. They recognize that they have to share, that they have to cooperate, that they have to wait, that they have to exhibit patience, that they can't always have what they want straight away. And these manners and politeness and so on and so forth are all ways of coping with life. And so a child is taught all of those behaviors and coping mechanisms, and their emotional empathy therefore grows in that respect. So in that circumstance, the baby will start off as narcissistic, but avoids being a narcissist by virtue of not having the genetic predisposition, or if they have, there's no lack of control environment. And they get taught the coping mechanisms and their emotional empathy develops. Thus, they either become narcissistic, but not a narcissist, normal, or an empath.
Yeah, that's very interesting. As this show is called Fountainhead Forum, I'm naturally wondering, do you have any opinions on Ayn Rand or people who are interested in Ayn Rand?
There's not an individual that I have a huge interest in. I know the name,
Yes.
but if you something you want to ask me, ask away, and if I'm able to answer, I will.
Well, you brought up, well, I think there's a tendency. I mean, Ayn Rand often wrote a book called The Virtue of Selfishness, and it
Yeah.
seems like to a certain extent with her own relationships, and it seems like also that narcissists tend to have they sometimes try to build cults. I mean,
That's true.
what would you say, for example, about Richard Bandler, who is one of the co-creators of neurolinguistic programming?
Again, that's not an individual that I'm familiar
Okay.
with. But touching on the point about cults, that they are invariably run by narcissists, because the purpose of a cult is to control people towards some kind of aim, but control is involved in that, one of the prime aims. The cult leader gets the responses of people. That's fuel. They can acquire the character traits of the cult members, and they'll get residual benefits, whether it's having sex with lots of different partners, whether it's getting money from those individuals, whether it's wielding power externally because of those individuals. So a cult services the prime aims. So in a way that I talked earlier on about how politics is a honeypot for narcissists, cults are as well, albeit they tend to only serve really the purpose of one, the cult leader. But sometimes you'll get more narcissists because other narcissists are recruited into it and act as lieutenants for the top dog.
Do you think it's also characteristics of narcissists that they always require a bunch of yes men around them? People who always agree with them on
Well,
everything.
the advantage of yes men is, remember, the narcissist needs control. Okay, so if you've gone and invaded another country, what you don't want is an insurgency, because that means that you're tying up soldiers, supplies, armored vehicles, dealing with an insurgency, and that all costs money and time. What you want is to steamroller your opposition, shock and awe them into defeat, occupy the country, pilfer its resources, bingo, job's a good one. So similarly with the narcissist wants people to be controlled and compliant, and that's why narcissists choose certain people as their victims, because they are identified as people who are easiest to control. So similarly, being surrounded by yes men works for narcissists because it means that they're not having to put as much effort in to control those people.
I don't know why I didn't ask this earlier. What about Neil Ferguson?
Who's that?
He's the epidemiologist who forecasted all this gloom and doom, but then went out and violated his the social distancing recommendations he advocated for.
Oh, right, I see. Again, he's not an individual that I am familiar with, but for somebody to behave like that, well, that's obviously hypocritical. It's an indicator that that individual might be a narcissist, but doesn't necessarily mean that they are. And if it's an individual that I was to put under what I call the Tudor scope, it might be the case that I would determine that he is a narcissist. It might be that he made a mistake. I don't know enough about him to provide you with an informed view.
Yeah. Who's an example of a famous person or an entertainer that you would say is not a narcissist?
Will Smith.
Okay. What makes you think Will Smith's? What made you conclude that Will Smith's not a narcissist?
Because he exhibits emotional empathy, that he doesn't have a pathological need for control. He doesn't require the receipt of fuel. He's the victim of a narcissist because his wife is one, but there are instances, of course, where two narcissists come together. And if you want to understand more about how I reached that conclusion, I have an entire series dedicated to analyzing Will Smith. So I go through all the aspects of his life and career to explain why he isn't one.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. And what would you say about Harry, since you covered that a lot?
Well, with Prince Harry, what you have is another individual who's been caught by a narcissist. So there are some people that say that Harry is one. He isn't. Because if you look at his behavior before his wife came along, it's completely different. Certainly, there have been instances where he's misbehaved in the past, but empathic people are not saints. What has happened is that as a consequence of her exploitation of his vulnerabilities, for example, he felt a bit left out as being the spare, the fact that he looked at his brother, who has a fantastic relationship with the Princess of Wales, and he had a degree of envy of that. But the fact that he obviously suffered considerably as a consequence of the death of his mother in tragic circumstances that were so prominent, all of that's had an impact on the man. And hitherto, much of that was dealt with within the royal family, and of course he was protected and shielded by them. So where he did act out, if we can describe it as such, it didn't come to prominence, but it didn't happen that often. And it's shown with his behavior that he exhibits emotional empathy. But then along came Meghan Markle. And what she's managed to do is turn down his emotional empathy for other people, with a consequence that he has strong narcissistic traits, that they've come very much to the fore, so that now he behaves like an entitled brat. And that's why many people have turned against him, and why he continues to engage in ridiculous victim mentality behavior, because he's basically listened to the poison that's been poured in his ears and is unable, as a consequence of low cognitive function and his own emotional thinking, is unable to see what he's actually dealing with. And he believes what she tells him. And also, there's a degree of wanting to keep her happy. He thought he'd found someone amazing and marvelous because that's what she originally portrayed to him. And then when it starts to go wrong, rather than him go, oh, well, that's enough of that then, I'll believe all of the doubters, he thinks to himself, she was once wonderful. Maybe she's just reacting to all of this press and stress and pressure even. And consequently, I want to support her because he does genuinely love her. And therefore, he wants to get on the right side of her. So therefore, he will go along with much as what's been said. When you've got somebody coming along who keeps telling you that you're brilliant and wonderful and that you should actually, your family, Harry, they haven't looked out for you. Your family haven't looked after you. Your brother's got it in for you. Your dad has never cared for you. He's always been distant and emotionally apart from you. He starts to believe the propaganda that's being poured in his ear, and that makes him easier to control.
True, yeah. Just what would you say about Diana, by the way?
In what respect?
Narcissist, not a narcissist, or just an empath, or?
Well, I may well examine her under the Tudor scope in the future, so I'm going to keep my cards close to my chest in that respect.
Yeah, although that might be a PR minefield for yourself. Do you think narcissists tend to play the victim a lot?
Some do. I don't, for example, but certain types of narcissists do. All narcissists have a victim mentality because the way that narcissism works is to portray the world as a cruel and venal place that's out to get us. But so whilst they may have that mindset, not all narcissists display that to the outside world. It just shapes their thinking. But certain narcissists very much play the victim to the outside world. Why does this always happen to me? Why are you being so cruel to me? Why does everything go wrong? Why are people hating on me? It's so unfair. And they don't realize that they are actually the instigator of the problem, not the recipient of it. So there are, again, certain types of narcissists that very much play up to that victim mentality because the narcissism is telling them that. It isn't the case that the narcissist goes, I know I'm not a victim, but I'll pretend to be because that's good fun. They honestly and genuinely believe that they are, and then that translates into their behaviors.
And that just made me think of another. I don't know if she's as big over there as she is in America. What would you say about Taylor Swift?
Well, Taylor Swift I've examined as part of putting her under the Tudor scope, and she's a narcissist.
Yeah, but I mean, so many songs about how this this man or that man has wronged her, and it's
Well, precisely. And so
yeah,
what she does is she uses the fact that she's a talented songwriter and lyricist and has a legion of slavishly devoted fans to her, to use that as a means to assert control over the men that have let her down. So she forms a relationship. It doesn't last because, for the reasons that I set out earlier in our conversation, Chris. And in order to then control them, she smears them through her music.
yeah, and she calls them out by name too. You know, it's
Exactly.
you
And
know,
she knows
you know,
exactly what she's doing because she's aware of what she is.
yeah,
She's so aware of what she is. In one of her recent songs, she made a mockery of the suggestions that she is a narcissist by turning around and saying, one of the lyrics was, maybe it's my covert narcissism, because evidently other people have said that about her. She knows what she is, so she's not rejecting it as an unaware narcissist. She's basically saying, I know what I am, and I know that you know, but I'm still going to take the piss out of it because I am so powerful that I can do that.
yeah,
And I explained in my analysis, if you want to see her again, basically saying, I know what I am, and I'm actually going to put it there in plain sight for you all, is to watch the video Blank Space. It's all about a narcissist. She knows what she is, and she finds it hugely entertaining to dangle that in front of people and see that they don't see it. Well, I do, and some other people do, but the majority don't. They just think, oh, yes, that's a good song. That's entertaining. And oh, poor Taylor, she's been let down yet again by another man, so she's entitled to write about them because these men are schmucks.
If somebody complains a lot but isn't a narcissist, what would you say that reflects? Is it just a passive aggressiveness or what?
Well, somebody who whinges a lot and they're not a narcissist, it might just be that they're pretty useless at life, and therefore that's why things go wrong for them. So they need to take a long, hard look in the mirror and start to get a bit of backbone and suck it up.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a. Do you think narcissists in general tend to be more passive aggressive? I mean, for example, like always showing up late for meetings or things like that.
Well, that is an indicator because it shows a self-absorption and a sense of entitlement, a lack of boundary recognition, a lack of accountability for behaviors, a lack of emotional empathy for those affected by that person being a latecomer. So again, it's an indicator. But in terms of the types of narcissist, then there are a sizable number which are passive-aggressive, but you also have a lot that are overt and aggressive also. So it's not the case that the majority of narcissists are passive-aggressive ones.
Yeah. Do you think what I would call victim politics especially attracts narcissists? I mean,
yes,
people
it will do because, again, it's a means. Politics, as I mentioned earlier on, is an environment that would attract narcissists, and a particular type and flavor of narcissists will be attracted to utilize victim politics. Absolutely the case.
Yeah, like, we're always looking for who the victims are, like whether it be, all women are victims or all members of this class are victims. Or would you say, I wonder, do narcissists tend to be higher IQ or lower IQ or just average?
There can be all of those things.
Yeah. What do you think if somebody has? We probably don't have much time left, but if somebody has a problem with narcissist, if somebody realizes they're narcissist, what can they do to fix themselves?
Come and talk to me. Watch my videos. Read my books.
Okay. Yeah. Well, this has been I knew this would be a very interesting conversation, and you have a great voice too. I mean, certainly.
Thank you.
You probably put a lot of work into that too. It's you're English, but it sounds like you're really not having an accent at all, which I find interesting. So,
well, there is a slight accent there, but I speak with what's known as received pronunciation, which is like a BBC broadcaster, a newsreader. So there's a tint of a northern accent there because I spent some time growing up in the north of England as well. But I've moved around a lot, and that's why I have this. I have a voice that doesn't really sound like it has an accent. It's just clear and easy to understand and stentorian in nature. But thank
But
you for the
I
compliment.
can imagine though, if you want to go to work for the BBC, you probably have to have no accent, or you have to have a voice that appeals to everybody.
Well, it varies because in certain instances they quite like somebody to
Yes.
have a regional accent because they're all for diversity. So it depends where it is. I think in some instances with certain newsreaders, they want somebody that would have a voice similar to mine so that they're clear when they enunciate their words and therefore everybody can understand them. And then in other instances, they prefer some local flavour, if I could describe it as such. So they want somebody who'll come and go,
Yeah.
"Hey, up me duck, how's it going?" So
Yes.
you'll have
Well,
differences.
from what I hear, England actually might have more, Britain might have more accent diversity than America does. It's maybe just because it's an older country.
Probably the case, and also you have to bear in mind, although the United States is a melting pot of different nationalities and races, England has been with all the various people that came and landed there. So, for example, you only have to look at the northeast of England and to see how it has been influenced by the Viking invasions that took place there, what became Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. So, for example, in the northeast of England, there's a city called Newcastle, and there, the people that come from there are known as Geordies. So they'll say, for instance, I would say, I'm going home. They would say, I'm going hjem. If you're Norwegian, you say hjem for home. So the old Norse word for home, hjem, has been adopted by the Geordies. Geordies, when they talk about a ball, will say ball,
Yes.
which is what the Norwegians say. So both with accent and dialect, it's been influenced, and you get all of those different influences from all the various races and nationalities that have been through the United Kingdom over the years,
Yes.
from the Norman and the French and the German and so forth. So it's very interesting how they've all been created, and part of that, of course, is translated into the United States.
I was just in Ireland recently, and a lady told me a joke. She said, "What's the difference between Jesus and Bono?" And she said, "Jesus doesn't walk around Dublin thinking that he's Bono."
Exactly. Yeah, I've heard that.
I don't know where you'd put Bono in as narcissist, but
Oh yes, he is.
One thing that I do does impress me about that band. I've never heard of them engaging in any self-destructive behavior or ever being arrested, and they've always been together. There's never been a breakup or any fights or ugly breakups. And
I suspect there's a lot that has gone on in the scene, as there invariably is with bands. I know at least one of them is an alcoholic and has been dry.
I didn't know that. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, has been dry for about 25 years.
Yeah.
So I think so. I'm sure there are stories to tell, but they've just managed it in a way that it doesn't get out for public consumption.
Well, a lot of bands, also they don't break up, but they'll just take a break. They'll say, okay, we're not gonna work together for a while, and they'll just quietly do that though. Whereas
also, it's probably as a consequence of the fact that Bono is God. He's able, of course, to delete people's memories, so they don't actually remember seeing what went on.
Yeah. Contrast that, say, to the Spice Girls who had a couple albums and were history almost immediately. But yeah. Well, it's been great talking to you.
Yeah, but you still remember them now. So
yeah. Do you have anything else you want to say before we go?
The only thing that I would add, Chris, is thank you for having me on the program. And if anybody would like to learn more about narcissism and psychopathy and to do so from my excellent source material, you can do so on my YouTube channel, which is HG Tudor, Knowing the Narcissist, the Ultra, or on my blog, as I mentioned earlier, narcsite.com.
Yeah.
I have platforms under Knowing the Narcissist, Twitter, Threads, and Facebook. And there are various books under my name, HG Tudor, that can be found on Amazon as well. And you can access a wealth of material there, both free and paid for. And you can consult with me if you want a bespoke solution to dealing with a particularly difficult situation with a narcissist. And I'd look forward to assisting you, and you can join the many thousands of people that I've spoken to already and the many millions that I've helped through my work. Yes,
there's a lot of good stuff there. I do wish you had, maybe had longer videos instead of lots of short videos, but that's a preference.
Well, that's catering to the 10-minute rule that most people are incapable of maintaining their attention for beyond 10 minutes. So
there's a lot of truth there. Well, I'm Chris Baker. Please give the video a thumbs up, like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow the channel. go buy my novel, Escape from the Village, and we're out. Thank you very much, HG. It's been great having you on here. Bye-bye.
You're welcome.